Here's the point. This war can continue for a long time, but the United States will continue to stand with Ukraine and the Ukrainian people in the fight for freedom. And I just want you to know that. And by the way, if I got to go to war, I'm going with you guys. I tell you. I mean it. I want to talk about what I'm here today to talk about. You women are men and the American union movement. Remember, you know, when the Fair Labor Standards
We wanted to
Act
bring
was
you the
first
top
passed,
of those
everybody said,
remarks. I'm
"Have
Chuck
you?"
Todd here at Meet the Press Daily. We wanted to bring you the top of those remarks. We knew they were going to be about the latest decision by the U.S. government and the Biden administration to announce some new sanctions on Russia. The rest of his speech, it is a union event. It is obviously not expected to be about Russian sanctions. Bring you any news. If it happens, you can go find the speech online if you would like. The new sanctions.
The victorious unionization efforts at Amazon last week is undoubtedly one of the most important, most exciting labor victories in our lifetimes, and the mainstream media is just ignoring it. This video of Chuck Todd interrupting Biden's speech at the North American Building Trade Union is priceless. We must show the president's remarks on war and defense and the military, but when it comes to unionization efforts that threaten the big guys and bring unparalleled support to the working class, that's a bit too far for Chuck Todd and MSNBC. As Ken Klippenstein summarized it, war, 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 unprecedented statement about labor unions and Amazon. Okay, whoops, back to the studio for more war. The media, especially MSNBC, has been relatively mum on the Amazon unionization, which is hardly surprising when you think of the network as the bastion of corporate elitism it is. But this clip really drives home the extent to which they are shunning this story. The president quite literally says, quote, "I want to talk about what I'm here today to talk about." And in the space in between, you can just picture Todd and the producers hanging on Biden's every word to see if he's going to keep salivating over the war. And when he doesn't, it's almost comical how quickly they change their tune. And let's give credit where it's due. Joe Biden wholeheartedly supporting the union efforts is a huge deal, and one that Democrats should be bursting to talk about on the networks as their approval ratings before the midterms hit dangerously low territory. But this segment also proves just who Chuck Todd and MSNBC's audience is. People who care more about Russian sanctions than securing worker protections for the working class. And look, there's nothing wrong with having a preference for certain types of news over another, especially when it comes to the situation in Ukraine. But the fact is that an overwhelming majority of the American people are worried about their living expenses, job security, and securing a future of dignity. A recent Gallup poll states that 1 in 5 Americans feel that the high cost of living and fuel is the most important issue facing the nation, while those who think the war in Ukraine is most pressing represent only 9% of the population. Of course, the war in Ukraine is a travesty that deserves coverage, but not at the expense of the escalating and momentous union movement across the country. One thing labor organizers know is that success somewhere in organizing has a domino effect nationwide, and we're already starting to see that with Amazon, Starbucks, and more workplaces. It speaks just to who MSNBC's audience is, a dwindling shred of the American population, and I think the network needs to be putting more energy into covering topics that affect working Americans, not just for their network's audience numbers, but to galvanize the public and continue messaging that we are living in an unprecedented time of labor organizing. Of course, we know this isn't just an oversight on the part of MSNBC, but a deliberate attempt to brush these historic gains that threaten their corporate model under the rug. Thanks so much for watching. You can follow me on all platforms at Caro Johnson 917.